Let me start with an important question that I know many of you have been quietly asking yourselves. If a new stimulus check is really coming in 2026, why does everything about it feel so confusing, so uncertain, and frankly, so hard to trust? If you've been seeing headlines, social media posts, or videos claiming that a brand new $2,000 payment is on the way, you're not alone. A lot of people are hearing these claims right now. And for anyone living on a fixed income or trying to stretch Social Security each month, that kind of news can feel like a lifeline. But before hopes rise too high, or before anyone makes decisions based on money that may never arrive, there are some very important things you need to understand clearly. My name is Sarah, and I want to walk through this calmly, carefully, and honestly with you, not to scare you, not to disappoint you, but to protect you. Because the truth about stimulus payments in 2026 is more complicated than a headline or a social media clip makes it seem. Some of what you're hearing does come from real discussions happening in Washington, but much of it is being misunderstood, exaggerated, or in some cases deliberately twisted to mislead people who are already under financial pressure. Right now, as things stand, there are no new federal stimulus checks that have been approved or scheduled for 2026. None. That's not an opinion. That's the current position according to federal officials. The last actual stimulus checks authorized by Congress were issued during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 2021. Many of you remember those payments. The first was $1,200, followed by $600, and then $1,400. Those payments were tied directly to a national emergency when businesses shut down, unemployment surged, and millions of households suddenly lost income. Now, some confusion has come from payments that went out later, even into 2024 and early 2025. People saw deposits hit bank accounts and assumed new stimulus money had been approved. In reality, those payments were catch-up payments tied to the recovery rebate credit. These were for people who qualified for earlier stimulus payments but never received them or did not receive the full amount. The IRS allowed eligible individuals to claim that money when filing their 2021 tax return. However, and this part is critical, the deadline to claim that credit was April 15th of 2025. That deadline has passed, and officials have been very clear that there are no extensions for it. So if you're seeing posts right now saying things like the IRS is still sending stimulus checks or apply now before time runs out, please be extremely cautious. At best, that information is outdated. At worst, it may be an outright scam. And unfortunately, scams are becoming more aggressive every time there's talk of government payments. I know how discouraging this can feel. Prices are still high. Grocery bills haven't come down the way many hoped. Rent, utilities, and insurance costs continue to rise. For many seniors, Social Security doesn't stretch as far as it used to. So when the word stimulus starts circulating again, it brings back memories of a time when there was a little extra breathing room. That reaction is human. There's nothing wrong with hoping, but hope needs to be grounded in facts, especially when your financial security is involved. This brings us to the proposal that's fueling much of today's confusion. You may have heard about something called a tariff dividend, often described as a $2,000 payment to Americans. This idea has been discussed publicly by President Trump and members of his administration. The concept is different from pandemic-era stimulus checks. Instead of borrowing money or increasing the deficit, the proposal suggests using revenue collected from tariffs, which are taxes placed on imported goods, and returning some of that money directly to Americans. The argument being made is that tariffs are generating significant revenue for the federal government. Supporters of the idea say that rather than keeping all of that money in the general budget, some of it could be distributed back to citizens as a dividend. The claim has even been made that 2026 could be one of the largest tax refund seasons in history, with Americans potentially receiving payments funded by tariff revenue while still reducing the national debt. That sounds appealing, but here's the part that often gets left out. This tariff dividend is not approved. It is not law. It is not funded. It is an idea, a proposal, and nothing more at this point. For any payment like this to actually happen, Congress would have to pass legislation that specifically authorizes it. The president cannot send out checks on his own. The Constitution requires Congress to approve and fund any federal spending. White House economic advisors have acknowledged this openly. They've stated that Congress would need to appropriate the funds for a tariff dividend to become reality. Earlier in 2025, officials even said budget conditions made such payments unlikely. More recently, they've suggested there may be some fiscal room to consider it, given changes in deficit projections. But notice the language being used. May, could, being discussed. None of those words mean approved or guaranteed. Another important question is whether there's even enough money from tariffs to support a $2,000 payment to every adult American. Independent budget analysts and economists are deeply divided on this. Estimates suggest current tariffs could bring in a few $100 billion per year, but sending every adult a $2,000 payment would cost roughly $600 billion. That's a significant gap. Closing it would require trade-offs, either by cutting spending elsewhere or finding additional revenue. There's also the issue of who really pays for tariffs. While tariffs bring money into the government, many economists point out that consumers often end up paying higher prices for goods as a result. In that case, giving people a dividend funded by tariffs may simply return some of the money they already paid through higher costs. It may help, but it's not the same as receiving free money without strings attached. On top of all this, there is legal uncertainty. Some tariffs are currently being challenged in court. Lawsuits question whether the authority used to impose certain tariffs was lawful. The Supreme Court has heard arguments in some of these cases, and decisions are expected in early 2026. If the court strikes down parts of the tariff program, the revenue source for a tariff dividend could shrink or disappear altogether. So when people ask whether they should plan their budget around a $2,000 tariff check, the honest answer is no. This is something to be aware of, not something to count on. It is not approved, not funded, and not guaranteed. Even supporters of the idea have admitted it is far from a done deal. There was, however, a recent example that shows direct payments can happen under specific conditions. In late 2025, a one-time payment known as a warrior dividend was approved for military service members. Eligible active duty and reserve members received a tax-free payment of about $1,776. That happened because there was a clear funding source, a defined group of recipients, and enough political support to move quickly. It shows how targeted payments can be approved when all the pieces align. But it also shows that these payments are usually narrow in scope, not broad checks sent to everyone. While these discussions continue, scams remain a serious and growing threat. Every time there's talk of stimulus payments, scammers move fast. Text messages claiming to be from the IRS, emails with official-looking logos, phone calls demanding personal information. They all sound convincing, especially when someone is worried about money. Here's what you need to remember. The IRS does not contact people by text message about stimulus payments. They do not send direct messages on social media. They do not call out of the blue asking for your social security number, bank account information, or a processing fee. If anyone asks for that information in connection with a supposed stimulus payment, it is a scam. Do not click links. Do not respond. Do not send money. Protecting your personal information is just as important as protecting your finances. Now, even though there is no new stimulus check approved, that does not mean there is no help available. This part of the conversation doesn't always make headlines, but it matters. Programs like SNAP continue to help eligible households with food costs. Medicaid and CHIP provide health coverage for millions. Social Security benefits remain a stable source of income for retirees and people with disabilities, adjusted over time for cost of living changes. Assistance programs for heating, cooling, housing, and temporary cash support are still in place. These programs may not arrive as a single large check, but over time, they can provide real relief. Applying can feel overwhelming, but these are real resources available right now, not proposals that might happen someday. Big, nationwide stimulus checks usually happen during true emergencies. The pandemic was one of those moments. Today, the economy is in a different phase. Policymakers are being more cautious, budgets are tighter, and relief tends to be more targeted. That doesn't mean people aren't struggling. It simply means the form of assistance looks different. So when you see bold claims online, take a moment, ask where the information is coming from, look for confirmation from official sources, and do not make financial decisions based on money that has not been approved. If something changes, if legislation passes, if a payment is officially authorized, I'll be here to explain exactly what it means, who qualifies, and what to expect. Until then, the best thing you can do is stay informed, stay cautious, and focus on the resources that are available to you today. I know it's not the answer everyone wants to hear, but honesty and clarity matter, especially when it comes to your financial security.